Let's start with a simple experiment. What do you see? Most of you might say it's the picture of a man. But is it? So, what about now? A woman? I say it's just a human. But the real question here is, why are we always so insistent on attaching the idea of gender to everything? It's not our fault for thinking in such binary terms, because that's how we've been programmed to think. We look at men and women differently, even when we don't want to. There is just no escaping this, because this conditioning began before you could even help it. It began before you were even born, when your parents were wondering if your toddler's suit should be pink or blue. And then there was just no going back, was there? Let me tell you a story. Tell me if this sounds familiar. Once upon a time, there lived a fair and beautiful princess. Everyone in the kingdom loved her, except for the evil witch, who was jealous of her beauty. So she cursed the princess, and only a true love's kiss could save her. So finally, a very strong and handsome prince defeated the witch, kissed the princess, saved her, and they lived happily ever after. This is the plot of almost every fairy tale we grew up with. These stories reek of sexism, but we never realized that when we were enjoying them. I mean, I loved Cinderella, her beautiful dress, her fairy godmother's magic, the handsome prince. I was completely sold on that happily ever after. I never questioned why Cinderella could only be happy after she met the prince, or why she needed a fairy godmother to solve all her problems, or why she never stood up to her evil stepmother. Wait, why did the stepmother have to be evil in the first place? My ideas of what is normal, what is right, what would make me happy, what is beautiful, was slowly being defined by a system that glorified inequality. These stories taught me that being fair means being beautiful, that witches are always evil, and that all my problems would disappear if a big, strong man showed up. For the longest time, I continued believing in them. But then I was introduced to the F word. No, not that F word, the other F word, which is so simple, yet so misunderstood. I'm talking about feminism here. My aunt was the first person who introduced me to feminism. She was also the person who introduced me to books like Pride and Prejudice and Little Women. Pride and Prejudice is still one of my favorite books till date. I loved how Elizabeth defied societal norms in the Victorian era, and it got me thinking, why weren't we introduced to such strong and independent characters from the very beginning? Okay, let's be real. 3 or 4-year-olds can't go around reading Pride and Prejudice. So they are going to learn from Cinderella and Snow White, which means that these characters had to become stronger role models. I was 12 when I first read Pride and Prejudice. I had this thought in the back of my mind, but I didn't have any exciting ideas. So the thought remained just that for a while. Then, in the summer of 2018, I undertook a photography project titled Fairy Tales. So for this project, I created a series of posters and got 4 of my friends and myself to dress up as traditional fairy tale characters, but completely changed the morals of these stories. The whole point of this project was to challenge how women are portrayed in traditional media. This tiny photo shoot then became the basis of my book, New Age Fairy Tales. So I grew up reading Tales from the West, and I didn't have many characters that looked like me. So I decided to create brown characters so that children reading these stories could relate to them. Now, coming to the other stereotypes that I broke. So I have fairly dark skin. In fact, I used to be much darker as a child. And I remember many relatives advising my mother to apply haldi, that is turmeric, to my skin and using this fairness cream and that fairness cream. And as a child, I just didn't get it. I loved my complexion. I didn't see what was wrong with it. But India as a country has always been so obsessed with fairness. Let me show you an example. So the funny thing here is that this is the wanted groom section, and this is how women are being marketed, with the most widely used adjective being fair. You get the point. So this prompted me to create a Snow White that combated colorism. All right. So the next picture that I'm about to show you will probably make you go like, or, but would you have the same reaction to the next picture? We have been conditioned to believe that fat equals ugly. And what's worse is that we only apply this to humans. We've all seen someone get fat-shamed. In my case, it was my younger sister. So I wanted the story of the Little Mermaid to be about body positivity, with the tail as a metaphor for her body. My Little Mermaid loved every curve in her body, and nobody could tell her, "Itna mat kha, moti ho jayegi," which is to say, don't eat so much, you'll grow fat. How many times have you heard someone say this? Or, let's be honest, said this to someone else? And then, I got to working on my favorite fairy tale. The glass slipper suddenly became so much more after I started throwing the F word around. Cinderella, as we know, has always been very hardworking. I just thought it was time she reaped the rewards for it all by herself. Because let's face it, real life doesn't come with fairy godmothers. One of the biggest obstacles to equality has always been the wage gap that exists between men and women. According to the Global Wage Report 2016 to 17, in India, an average graduate woman earns about rupees 600 per day, as opposed to a graduate man who earns rupees 800 per day. This 30% wage gap continues to haunt us even today. In My Happily Ever After, Cinderella shatters the glass ceiling by overcoming this wage gap and achieves her ambitions. It's pretty magical in its own way. My mother has always taught me to fight my own battles. And women are very capable of doing just that. But everybody loves a damsel in distress, don't they? Media has romanticized the idea of beautiful, delicate women who need to be saved by quick-thinking, hulky men. From film industries to comic franchises, everybody is guilty of this. Sure, you have Wonder Woman and Captain Marvel, but then you also have Iron Man and Deadpool. Hey, who's on your t-shirt? I agree. There is a slow revolution that's coming about, where media is becoming more gender sensitive. But all I'm saying is that we can go much faster if we start right from the beginning. So, what if we changed the story a little? And Sleeping Beauty was about women saving themselves instead of waiting around to be rescued. Because for as long as we continue to advocate the idea of a damsel in distress, we will truly only be sleeping. All right, so check this group of words out. Nothing out of the ordinary, just another bunch of everyday adjectives. However, there is one word in there that changes how we interpret everything around us. In our world, beauty is not just another adjective as it should have been. Beauty is an association. Beauty is a definition. Beauty is a character estimation. Beauty is a standard. Someone who is beautiful is probably more approachable, probably more successful, probably very happy with their life, but is also a little vain, right? But would you say the same thing about a tall person or a hungry person? Our world has such an ugly obsession with beauty that we just can't let it be what it actually is. Just another adjective. Why is it that we find this so hard to internalize? Somewhere, deep down, we are not fully convinced of this, even though we know it is correct. And that's probably because all of us grew up with undue importance being given to beauty. I wanted to change that. But I know how difficult it is to let go of a belief system. So, what if I could introduce you to a new one? Give you a new adjective to hold on to. At least this is something we can all work on, right? In my retelling of Beauty and the Beast remains a beast. Because what matters more is the fact that he is still himself on the inside, and that his love for beauty does not change either. It was so important for the Beast to be a role model as well, because why shouldn't boys read fairy tales? Fairy tales which teach them that they could be the Prince Charming who helps Cinderella achieve her career goals, or the Beast who helps Beauty in her scientific pursuits. The most difficult thing you can break is a pattern. Each and every association you have with gender today is just that, a pattern. The easiest way to break it is to form a new one, because everything after that is just a domino effect. So if today, parents, educators, and policymakers inculcate feminism in children, then tomorrow, when these children become parents, they will not worry about their toddler's suit being pink or blue. So with my book, New Age Fairy Tales, I am looking at creating some new patterns today. Snow Not So White, the little mermaid who doesn't give up her tail. Cinderella, the lady boss. A very woke Sleeping Beauty. And a beast who was loved for the man that he was. My idea of a happily ever after. Thank you.